especially for middle managers and factories. See, the reason I'm saying this is because a lot of current literature will criticize Taylorism over and over again. But what I want you to understand is why it was so attractive in the beginning for American economic freedom and also to create a middle class. Because remember, again, the middle class may have had money, but they never had enough money to have a lot of too much. I mean, a lot of certain things like shoes and cabinets and furniture and so on and so forth. It was Taylorism that allowed for this systematization of the production process that brought prices low, that allowed the middle class basically to prosper. Okay, so Taylorism, we standardize tools, we standardize work, we do settings, and we create this thing of time studies. We talked about time and motion studies in the Morgan text, but if you look at page 73, it shows you an example of where here apparently the example on page 73 in the middle of the text is pig iron handling pig iron, which is basically a more raw form of iron. And it shows you how there are 5 steps in handling pig iron: picking up the pig from the ground up pile, walking with it from ground up pile, walking with it on a level, walking with it up an incline, throwing the pig down, walking back empty to get another load. And then each of the 5 work elements, if you notice, has time in the hundredths of a minute per foot walked, hundredths of a minute, and per foot walked. So now you have standardized work. You know exactly what is involved in doing a piece of work. So the gang bosses, the foreman can't say, well, it's complicated, it's going to take that much time. You know exactly how much time it's going to take. Okay, and because you know exactly how much time it's going to take, you can tell the bosses and the foreman, this is what I want you to do, this is how long it's going to take, so I expect this much to be done in an hour. Okay, and in addition, you take more of their power away from them by giving them this idea of wage incentive systems. Okay, you let them know that you will pay them more if they create more. So if you look at page 74 and look at the third paragraph, it talks about this thing called the differential rate system. If a workman finishes 20 pieces per day and all of these pieces are perfect, he receives 15 cents per piece, making his pay 15 into 20, about $3. If, however, he works too slowly and turns out only 19 pieces, then instead of receiving 15 cents per piece, he receives only 10 cents per piece, making his pay 12 into 19, or $2.28 instead of $3 per day. If he succeeds in finishing 20 pieces, some of which are imperfect, then he should receive still a lower rate of pay, say 10 or 5 cents per piece, according to the circumstances, making his pay for the day only 2 or only 1 instead of 3. So what's this doing? This is creating an expectation for the worker to create at least 20 pieces per day and make them perfect. So that's the idea of wage incentive systems. Okay. He also had rewards and punishments, where he said that, and page 75, second paragraph, he believed that requiring the absolute best from workers builds moral character, whereas allowing them to do less than their best contributes to their moral decay. So now we're seeing a class system understanding of the worker. Taylorism thought, like a lot of rich people or well-off people did in those days, that the poor were inherently lazy, and as a result, we must be strict with them, because if we're not strict with them, then they don't do work the way that they ought to do. He also believed that paying them too much contributes to moral decay. So not only did he think that we shouldn't have paid, we should make them do the best, but we shouldn't pay them too much. We don't want them to get rich because they're not as smart as we are, so we don't want them to be too uppity, so to speak. Whereas higher pay is necessary to induce workers to become and remain ambitious and energetic, and causes them to save money, become more sober, and work more steadily. Too much money can have the opposite effect. So we're definitely seeing a kind of class bias here, right? It is the writer's judgment, and this is his own words, that for their own good, it is as important that the workmen should not be very much overpaid as it is that they should not be underpaid. If overpaid, many will work irregularly and then to become more or less shiftless, extravagant, and dissipated. It does not do for most men to get rich too fast. So we see a rewards and punishment sort of understanding. We also see increasing of administrative staff. And administrative staff, we see the gang bosses, the trades foremen being replaced by routing clerks, instruction clerks, time and cost clerks, disciplinarians. So we see this increased level of administration because, again, remember, you are letting the workers know exactly what you want. You are telling them how they're going to go about doing what it is that you want them to do, and you're telling them what you can expect from them. Okay, so now you kind of have to have a watchful eye, right? Because you're not trusting in any of their particular input. You are basically making them do what it is you want them to do. As a result, primarily, you had to have increased administrative staff. So what were the benefits of Taylorism? Well, we saw this idea of task specialization. We saw definite cost benefits. We saw work standardization. There was consistency and predictability in whatever that was coming out now from the factory. We saw economic rewards, right? It appeals to the individual's self-interest. You see the self-seeking behavior of rational man that, we should pay them enough so that they remain happy, but not pay them too much because we don't want them to get rich because eventually they are poor. And because they're poor, there must be a moral reason why they are poor. So we should leave them poor because if we make them too rich, it might make them lazy. So this economic reward comes there, but comes with a caveat. And then, it comes back to the whole idea of a rational man figuring out rationally what he needs, what the workers need, and very much an internal process model, right? The model is primarily based upon how work internally in the organization is going to be done. There is no output from the environment, whether what the workers' needs are, if the workers are stakeholders at all, what the needs of the environment are. It's primarily internal process models. So, do we see Taylorism in the public sector? Absolutely. We see a standardization of controlling work activities, especially for those aspects of the public sector that create standardized products. So Social Security, the DMV, any kind of product that you need from government that is highly standardized, where everyone gets the same thing, you definitely see standardization of controlling work activities. You also see a standardization of controlling work outputs. So you see both of these aspects happening in Taylorism. Okay, I think page 89 has a very good sort of understanding of how Taylorism relates to the public sector. You see these closed, less dynamic systems. So those systems that are not open or are not, that are highly rational and are not interacting too much with the environment, you definitely see a much more tailor-based approach to management. Hierarchical systems with little interaction or standardized interaction with the environment. The rewards for these kinds of things are primarily rewards for performance, okay? And exhibit 5.2 and 5.3, exhibit 5.2 are the 6 mechanisms for controlling work activities, and you see the 2 that are in gray that are highlighted, and 5.3, which is the motivational strategy. You see that primarily the rewards are for performance, distributing pay, promotions, and recognition based on individual performance. So what does that do? If primarily the reward is for the individual's performance, employees may meet or exceed role expectations because they value the material and psychological satisfactions that money, advancement, and recognition can provide. But you don't see a group level, outwardly looking environmental understanding of government or of government process. And this is where the bureaucracy then begins to lack, right? You begin to see why bureaucrats that do work in these highly standardized organizational environments begin to look only inwardly, internal process based and very much biased, and don't look outwardly and see what the needs of the citizens might be. So if you go to one of the biggest concerns or one of the biggest complaints you have about these highly internal process models is primarily that if something isn't the way that it should be, as per the government employee, their first reaction is, well, there's no form for that. I can't help you with that. Go somewhere else. Because they're so focused on the internal process, they cannot examine the outside environment and the needs of the outside environment. So this is where the model begins to lack for itself. So that's pretty much the idea of how Taylorism works for the public sector and the basis of scientific management theory. As I said, we've talked about this theory in the past. We looked at it in the Morgan text, but I did want to go through it one more time and delve into it a little bit more deeply, just so that you guys had a better idea as to why Taylorism was as big a deal as it was when it first came out as a management concept and management theory. So, in addition to Taylorism, or after Taylorism, a lot of theorists examined the concept of scientific management, and they came up with somewhat similar theories of administration that looked at administration, again, from a highly technical, highly scientific, at least in their minds, perspective. And so we're going to look at these other sort of technical theories of management in Chapter 6, which are called administrative management theory. And we're going to look primarily at three people, Fayol, Mooney, and Gulick. So let's start with Fayol and then move on to the other two. So first and foremost, this is something, again, that I've talked about in my other lectures. We need to understand why Fayol did what he did. So what makes Fayol, so important to us, and why Fayol would think the way that he was supposed to think? Well, first and foremost, let's look at who he was. So